Hello friends. A lot of political changes have taken place in Afghanistan recently, and for now political changes in Afghanistan are the only things that are discussed in the media houses and social media. Let us hope that these changes will end years of unrest and bloodshed in Afghanistan and restore peace and order in the region and help to reinstate the rights of the Afghan people. Let us put things straight. We will discuss various aspects point-wise. Before we move ahead, please subscribe to the Upfront and press the bell icon to get notification of all our updates. I'm Nihal Muhammad and you're watching the Upfront. Point number 1. The defeat and return of imperialist NATO forces led by the United States of America. Whenever we talk about Afghanistan, many of us forget one thing, or maybe many of us don't know about this. The United States had its army in Afghanistan for the past 20 years. An army of an outside country has been controlling the affairs of another country for the past 20 years. Let us talk about the effects this can have on a country later on, but I don't think anyone will disagree with me on the point that 20 years ago, the overthrow of the Afghan government through military action, the brutal atrocities on innocent civilians by colonial and imperialist forces, the series of bombings and raids on its cities, and the constant attempts to impose the will of foreign powers on the Afghan people is a reprehensible chapter of recent history. Today, it is gratifying to note that the perseverance and struggle of the Afghan people resulted in the withdrawal of the imperialist forces from their country. The last days of the Taliban. 20 years ago, on December 17, 2001, America's most famous magazine, Time magazine, shouted on its front page. There was also a picture of a disappointed Afghan citizen. But 2 decades later, looking back at Afghanistan, the days of superpower America and its benevolent parties who had come for robbery are already over. Now the days of the Taliban have begun. The days of another late superpower called the Soviet Union and its parent parties were over there a few decades ago, back in 1988. Thus, in the interests of privilege, the 18th century Afghan garrisons of Afghanistan have set a world record for having overthrown the world's 2 largest superpowers. There, the United States has lost not only its power but also about $1 trillion according to thousands of veterans and experts. Economic profit losses cannot be accurately accounted for because there is no official data as to how much the USA has robbed from Afghanistan, a country which holds the extraordinary mineral wealth in its womb. Similarly, in the long chapter of this attack and robbery, we can say there is an estimate to some extent as to how many Afghan lives have been killed in the hands of local terrorists, but there is no official data or any official estimate of how many civilians have been killed by Western forces. This lack of count is not at all shocking because in colonial culture, the cost of living for a domestic cat in the West is more important to them when compared to many human beings in Asia or Africa. The imperialist powers should learn a lesson from this episode and forever refrain from the policy of unnecessary interference in the affairs of poor countries to further their own vested interests. It is necessary that the United Nations and the international community should also learn a lesson from this and put in place a strong process to prevent the manipulation and interference of weaker nations at the hands of powerful countries. Only weeks after the NATO forces left Afghanistan, the Taliban went on capturing one district after another, and finally they captured the capital city of Kabul, forcing the government heads to flee from the country. With all their contemporary analysis and predictions, the media, which had left the world believing that the Taliban is nothing more than mindless terrorism and destruction, has been reluctant to believe that the Taliban warriors carried out the lightning fast capture without much violence and bloodshed. Now they are trying to cover up the shock and embarrassment for themselves. Even those who hate the Taliban have recognized and appreciated that their operations were bloodless. Afghanistan's ambassador to Russia, who listed the Taliban as a terrorist group, said the peaceful environment he had seen in Kabul during the past 24 hours had never been seen before. One thing that the world does not know much about, though, is the fact that the US had started dealing with the Taliban in the days when they were called the world's most obscure terrorist force. After several rounds of negotiations, the US government also announced its commitment to withdraw its troops and relinquish Afghanistan to the Taliban. So, though many of the calculations have been inverted, the current developments are not so unexpected. Point number 2. Taliban claims to represent Islamic values. So it becomes very important that they present the true essence of Islam in front of the world. The Taliban has been infamous in the past for carrying out violations of human rights and women's rights. But the Taliban is today claiming that it has changed and will allow women participation in schools, government and other fields under the ambit of the Islamic law. Taliban needs to understand that the eyes of the whole world are now on them and are closely monitoring their behavior and actions. The Taliban have the opportunity to present to the world a practical example of the benevolent and merciful system of Islam. They have the responsibility to show that Islam is the advocate of peace and well-being. It gives freedom of belief, the protection of the lives and property of all human beings, including minorities, is of paramount importance to Islam. Islam is also very sensitive about women's rights. Let us hope that the new rulers of Afghanistan will strictly adhere to these teachings of Islam and set an example before the world of an Islamic welfare state where everyone is free from fear and terror and lives a peaceful and prosperous life with equal opportunity to flourish and prosper. Point number 3. Challenges that Afghanistan led by Taliban faces now. Of course, it doesn't mean that all the problems of a nation sunk in poverty, filled with the majority of people living in hills, is solved only because they have chased the foreigners out. It is true that the indirect and direct foreign intervention that has been taking place there for nearly 4 decades has ended, but there is a new and long wave of giant challenges ahead of the Afghan people and their rulers. First of all, they need to get rid of the civil war curse. The Taliban group belongs to the Pashtun community, the largest community in the country, but they are not a majority. Their share of the population is about 38% only. The rest of the Tajik ethnicity is only about 25%, and Hazara ethnicities make up about 19%. Smaller races such as the Aimak, the Turkmen, the Baloch, the Uzbek, etc. are also very strong in some places. If the Taliban doesn't take the rest of the groups into belief and rule with their support, and if the Pashtun government replaces the Afghan government, the country would be devastated by endless internal violence. In this regard, it is a good sign that the Taliban leaders have initiated extensive negotiations with various factions within the country even before the conquest of Kabul. Afghan fighters who have housed the dissident and extremist groups of many countries, including the Gulf, need to say goodbye to their old traditions by forming their own government with internal unanimity and working to enrich and strengthen their country, which has lost all its power. First of all, we need to provide the best modern education for all the male and female members of the country, free from the traditional pitfalls such as gender bias. Industry, career and employment opportunities must be created. Constitutional rule of law must be established. All human rights and civil rights of all citizens should be safeguarded without discrimination. They must ensure the society is free from corruption and responsible use of the abundant natural resources must be done. Establish dependable friendship and cooperation with all nearby and distant neighbors and with the entire international community. In order to lead a country or society, only bravery and war skills are not enough. It requires many other qualifications such as competence, vision, broad stance and efficiency. One hopeful aspect is that the Taliban did not come directly from the battlefield to the palace. This is not the first time they have been empowered. power. Their government was established in Afghanistan 2 decades ago. The Taliban, which has only a few centuries of tribal and local governance, had made many foibles in the first place when they received authority. Let us hope that this time they do not use this opportunity for insanity, but learn from past blunders and genuinely engage in providing freedom, self-reliance, dignity, security and prosperity to their victimized country and its people with full accountability. Point number 4, formation of a democratic government. Let us also hope that a new government shall soon be established in Afghanistan by popular vote in the democratic and consultative spirit of Islam that represents all sections of the country, and one that shall prove to be a source of lasting unity and stability among the Afghan people. I would like to bring your attention to another fact here, that when the presidential elections were held in Afghanistan in 2019, the voter turnout was very low, as only 1.6 million showed up from the 9.7 million registered voters. Arab News journalist Syed Salahuddin also stated that at some polling centers, security forces outnumbered voters. This time around, let us hope for a free and fair election in a democratic way, where the citizens of Afghanistan participate wholeheartedly and play a role in electing their government. Reports that the Taliban have announced a general amnesty, assured peace and order to Sikhs, Hindus and other minorities, and hinted at dialogue and cooperation with all countries of the world must be welcomed. Point number 5, India's diplomatic relationship with Afghanistan. India and Afghanistan have a long-standing and healthy relationship. In recent years, India has also played an important role in the development of Afghanistan. Let us hope that this warmth and solid relations will continue and be further strengthened. It is the responsibility of the government of India to initiate healthy relations with the new Afghan government and to play its part in building and developing Afghanistan and ensuring peace and security throughout South Asia. If you like the content we provide, please subscribe to the Upfront and press the bell icon to get notification of all our recent updates. Please share our videos and educate others. Thank you.